form.
Is that on the course website?
It is, I believe so. I have a request so that it reduces my. What's that?
We're live.
Oh, I listen. I have a request to make my life a little easier. Use your first name for your name, because I end up having to then hand edit all of your names. And you guys somehow or another refer to yourselves with a different name for every single project. So choose a name, run with it. Okay? Just one name.
So you can hard code it.
Maybe your first name, whatever you go by. But yeah, just that. It makes it easier so I can turn around once I give you guys feedback. And incidentally, I want to send out if nobody has any objections, I want to send everybody the data so you can look at it. It's really pretty interesting. You get to see responded or listened to me when I told you about rating, that the 5 is like a B, right? And the 0 is like a C, and a 10 is an A.
So we still gave everyone like 7s, 8s, and 9s?
Yeah, but it wasn't 9s and 10s. So I bumped you, I like dragged you a little bit down.
0 is an A minus.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this time around, let's reconceptualize it a little bit. A 0 is a B. How about that? Because I don't think any of you guys are actually getting C's. Nobody's getting a C. Everybody has held one another in your group accountable, which is good. Thank you very much. But then the other thing is that there's not a lot of variance in your ratings. Okay, so I'm going to reconceptualize the rating scale. A 0 is a B. Yeah.
What's an A minus? Is that
Someplace
a 5?
between 0 and 10. And a 10 is like an A plus. How about that? All right. What I'm going to do is I really want you to use the rating scale. Okay. Oh, and you guys should know me by now. I don't care about grades. I should have started out the semester and say, everyone gets an A. Okay, now that we're done with worrying about grades, let's worry about learning.
Well, in this case, we're not worrying about grades. We're worried about you sending out the data and everyone seeing what we graded them.
I know, and that's the reason why I ask, is that I don't want to send that out because I want you to grade realistically. And by the way, I can take away names and just replace them with numbers. Is that okay?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Then you
Okay.
break the social contract.
Yes.
That we're all bound by.
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Because then someone's going to be like, you gave me a 2.
Yeah,
I gave you a B.
Son of a- yeah. Okay, so I will take all the names off of it. Do that.
Prepare for slaughter now.
Yes, yeah, but please use your name. Okay, for my purposes. Okay, but grade your conscience. 2 years time, I'm gonna get glasses. Until that time.
2 years, like
10 years.
2.
At the end of 2018. Yeah.
Commitment, all right.
Does anybody need pens? Do you need any pens? You're not gonna write on that. These things?
Oh,
That's 2016 never heard.
what's a pen?
A pen? What are you talking about? Okay, Elizabeth, on your mark, set, go.
Okay, so project 3, our group decided to examine contextual cueing and the effect that anxiety might have on it. So we live in a very complex visual environment, and we can use shortcuts by recognizing patterns to reduce the complexity and simplify our interpretation of our world. We're very interested for this project in specifically looking at how people learn such information, learn to recognize these patterns, and the possibility that anxiety level might affect their ability to successfully learn the repeated patterns. So just in general, contextual cueing research, the effect is marked by faster reaction times in response to patterns that are repeated over time, compared to those patterns that are newly and randomly generated each time. So the idea behind it is that you're implicitly learning to recognize the configurations of the patterns, and therefore you're able to find the target faster in subsequent trials. So for our methods, we administered a state trait anxiety inventory to our participants. So a score over 40 is considered highly anxious, and a score under 40 is considered low anxious. And then we used a visual search paradigm to examine those contextual cueing effects, similar to the one seen in the display. So participants are told that they need to find the T as quickly as possible in the display of L's, which direction the T is rotated in with a key press. And again, we'd expect that people would be faster to the repeated patterns that they've already seen before. So just some background about why we decided to use Bayesian for this project. Bayesian methods would result in a distribution of coefficients rather than simply a single point estimate of those coefficients. And we do this by using a Markov chain Monte Carlo method, and it gives us more robust results and results that are more representative to real life variability. And Bayesian methods are also more flexible in terms of our ability to specify which exact parameters we're interested in measuring and looking at. A lot of times in frequentist models, too much of the variance is going to be accounted for by those degrees of freedom attributed to main effects when we're not even necessarily interested in those main effects. So specific to our project, we're just interested in the interaction of anxiety and pattern. So specifically, anxiety, we would expect, or we're not interested in the main effect of anxiety because we don't necessarily expect there to be an overall difference in reaction time based on anxiety level. And we're not interested in specifically measuring the main effect of pattern because this is well reviewed in the literature, an established effect that people are faster to those repeated patterns. So the new thing that we're adding is that interaction of pattern anxiety. And we hypothesized that people would show a memory decrement or difficulty implicitly learning the patterns, specifically in the high anxious group, in response to those repeated patterns. And we would see slower reaction times to that specific group. So that's why we chose to use Bayesian, because we want to specify the interaction and not necessarily the main effects. So our predictive model includes two main predictors, anxiety level and pattern, and both are binary variables. So for anxiety level, we assigned a 0 to those with low anxiety and a 1 to those with high anxiety. And then pattern, we assigned a 0 to random newly generated patterns, and then a 1 to those patterns that are repeated throughout. And then, of course, our variable of outcome is the reaction time recorded in milliseconds. And again, we're specifically interested in that modeling of just the interaction of pattern and anxiety. So this is the outcome of our interaction model. It's a density distribution of the unstandardized beta coefficients. And it tells us specifically how much variance is accounted for by our model. So we did a meta-analysis of contextual cueing studies and chose our rope based on that literature. So our rope, we decided to be half a second faster or half a second slower is essentially the same thing as no difference in reaction times between conditions. Basically the typical noise that we would see in such studies. And as you can see, our HDI falls well within the rope. And this indicates that our model of the interaction pattern really accounted for actually very little of the variance seen in our reaction time data. And here we put in just a depiction of what an accurate and reliable model could have looked like compared to our unsuccessful model. So as you can see, the model is very peaked. So that means that we got consistent results over many iterations, as opposed to ours, which is much shorter. And also the entire distribution has shifted away from 0, indicating that it accounts for more of the variance in our reaction time data. So just to summarize, our model was unsuccessful And the interaction of pattern and anxiety did not account for very much of the variance in our reaction time data.
So could you go back to your posterior distributions? So where's the 95% HDI?
So we, I guess, used just the bottom is the rope. So the vertical line would be, I guess, the mean right in the middle of the HDI. So,
And I think there was an error on our slide. It's supposed to be that 36% of the variance falls within our rope, not 95% high density interval. Yeah, I think that was just a typo.
Because
Translation error.
95% is like a part of it. Right?
Well, we also never said 95%, just saying. Just see, it says HDI.
So 36% HDI?
Yeah, sure.
Right, because what Sam was asking is, the question that I had is that HDI is a different, almost credible, we consider it to be the credible interval, and rope is the evaluative range, right? So typically we would have an HDI bar as well as a rope bar.
yeah.
Where might that be? The HDI bar. Is it completely encompassed and just overlapping?
It would be most of the
It's not
data.
showing. That's not showing.
It's not showing, but
We didn't put it in.
it'd be like
Okay.
from here to here. Ish.
But that would be the 95%
Yeah.
HDI. Okay. Generally, if you put HDI up there, people want to see it that bar.
Yeah, the HDI was must have been a typo because we were having like a Google chat and it was kind of loud.
Oh, well,
So
okay, okay. Yeah, make sure anytime you put up terms, make sure if there's
a figure.
if there's a term and a figure, that the thing is on the figure, because it can be really confusing to people who know about Bayesian stuff. But people who don't, they would want to know which is which. Okay, that's good. Is this real data?
No.
Crap.
Milliseconds would be a crazy.
I know.
Yeah, I
See
know.
that?
I was gonna say.
It would be in frequentist models.
Like based on the
Yeah. Suspend your disbelief.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked, I was like, really?
Yeah, 50 or something.
All right, no other questions? All right, vote your conscience, remember, 0 is a B. Okay. New scaling, and then I get to see who was paying attention.
Paid attention.
But Nick, you're just worried.
It's coded.
It's
in my
too nice.
DNA.
Yeah.
I've been
I
in
love
school for my whole life.
classmates. These guys are awesome. 10.
It's in my blood.
All right, remember multivariate? And that was group 3. All right, we got group 5. Come on up, down, across.
Here.
You can use your computer.
I guess so.
Well, not
Because he's got.
there.
Sure.
Yeah. Some preposition.
Maybe I'm gonna turn off notifications for a second.
Your text messages.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're sending me some weird shit. So.
Here, I'll put this down just so that somebody doesn't lose their notebook to.
All right, we are here on behalf of the NFL, and the NFL would like to tell you one simple thing: concussions are not so bad. In fact, cartoons like this one are pure propaganda, designed to stop your kids from realizing their full potential through participation in the glorious sport of football. So a lot of naysayers have been telling you that dementia and traumatic brain injury are related. And like I said, we're here on behalf of the NFL to show you that that's probably not the case. Of course, we don't want to understate that dementia is very bad. And some people say that it has some risk factors. One of those risk factors, like I said, is traumatic brain injury. And as you know, football players get hit a lot because they're really big, strong, and tough. So what? This is 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So the lawyer for the NFL is getting a little ahead of himself. So I'm the histopathologist hired by the NFL, and they paid me a lot of money with a bonus and vacation to come up with these results. So the NFL approached me saying, hey, we have a problem. We have several decisions that we have to make based off your findings. So no pressure, right? None whatsoever from the NFL. Are concerned because all their players are getting hit and they're worried about dementia, and they're worried that the concussions that these players receive during games, they could be causing or at least leading to dementia later on. So should they implement a concussion protocol? And basically the research question they're asking is, do the number of TBIs and the age of TBI that occurs, does that predict the neuropathology? So that's why they approached me. So they also asked, can you do a Bayesian analysis rather than your silly little null hypothesis significance testing? Because not only do they want to go away from like the black and white that is null hypothesis significance testing, but they want to quantify the evidence in favor of the nulls. So, hey, these factors don't predict TBI, but look at all this evidence that suggests or even proves that TBI is not related to dementia. So our observed data comes from 108 players that donated their brains to the Allen Institute for Brain Science. And with those brains that they donated, I got a couple pieces of information, including the number of TBIs that they received, as well as the age at first. Our outcome is simply just the BRAC tangle severity score. Tangles are formed of a protein called tau, and tau kind of acts like tangled iPhone headphones. You want to hate yourself because it's just a mess, it can't do anything, it chokes off neurons, you don't get cellular communication. Basically, the higher the score, the more tangles, the more crappy brain you have. And the image on the right just shows what a tangle looks like.
Perfect. I am one of the statisticians the NFL hired, probably shouldn't have hired, but we'll go into it. So here we're looking at the prior probabilities. So from the NFL's perspective, no relationship based on the crud factor. There could be an ambient correlational noise of 0.3 for anything correlated, right? So for TBI, we even gave it directionality. We said 0.3 for the number of TBI and the negative 0.3 for the age of the first TBI, right? So the younger you are, perhaps higher the damage, and the more number of TBIs, the higher the potential prior distribution. So we couldn't quite figure out how to get the likelihood distributions for this, so we kind of figured out a logical way around it. So what we did was we used uninformed distribution to find kind of the posteriors, so we'll call it the uninformed posteriors, and using uninformed priors, uninformed posteriors equals the likelihood distribution. So using that, we then set the seed and reran with our priors, and we found there's not much difference, kind of showing what we kind of already know is that the data weighs more than to a certain extent, but what we found was small coefficients for the number of TBI and the age at first TBI.
So we're going to take these, the informed posteriors, and first of all, we're going to address each of the variables individually. So the first one we're going to address is the number of traumatic brain injuries. So as you can see at the bottom here, we have our region of practical equivalence. We've set it at negative 0.3 to positive 0.3. Again, like Nick said, basically indicate that anything that's correlated between those values would be equivalent to 0, or in that instance, not correlated. We also have our 95% HDI with the values of negative 0.8 to 0.22. And what that indicates is basically that the 95 HDI fits perfectly within our code factor. And the figure on the right demonstrates that So think of the x-axis, the x-axis as kind of an absolute value of the distance as you get further and further away from the mean of the posterior distribution. So as you, so from 0 and goes out like this. So like, and what the y-axis is essentially the amount of data that is currently being represented by as you get further and further out. So for instance, if all of your data was packed in to just the center bar here, you would end up with, because all of your data would be accounted for at the very beginning, and then currently are like that. So our limits of our highest HDI right here is the is 0.22 represented here. So there's about 96.8% of our data located within our rope. Basically, what this indicates is that the number of traumatic brain injuries doesn't significantly a higher score on the BRAC scale, so it doesn't predict more damage. In addition to that, we have our second variable. Again, very similar setup. We have this time referring to the age of the first traumatic brain injury. We have our rope still again set at -0.3 to +0.3. And our HDI, once again, fits entirely within the region of our rope. And figure on the right indicating that 97.7% of our data fit within the rope. So again, this indicates that the age in which a person receives their first TBI, again, also doesn't predict higher score on the RAC scale.
What does this tell us? Something we already knew, which is concussed NFL players need to toughen up. Brain injuries are not affecting their life, so don't sue us.
So just a disclaimer, one, don't bonk your head because we fiddled with our data a bit to get non-significance. Traumatic brain injury does predict traumatic brain injury does predict Alzheimer's disease, dementia. And this was actually real data pulled from the Allen Brain Institute from not football players, but for people who were clinically diagnosed with dementia. And yeah, just don't bonk your head because that's really bad. Okay, so you're lying.
That's what lawyers
Oh, yeah.
do.
Yeah, that's what lawyers do. So,
Creative representation of the truth.
yeah.
The end.
Any questions?
I have a question about the real data. How much does first concussion or TBI actually matter?
So age is a little bit finicky because with increasing age, you increase your risk of getting, as as you get older, your brain is killing itself, just FYI. So if you, well, it
Happy
happens.
holidays.
Yeah.
The longer it takes you to get your PhD, the harder it's
Yeah. So if you get like a TBI, say when you're older, it's much worse than if you get it younger. But then at the same time, if your brain is still developing, then you could completely fuck shit up too.
Fuck either way.
Yeah.
There's a moral to this
Just
story.
walk
Drink.
around. Walk
You
around
can get
with a
Korsakoff's, maybe. But cirrhosis, yes, and maybe that's better.
You gotta watch and enjoy the games from afar.
Yeah.
Disease, you got a question?
Yeah, can you go back to the results? I'm not entirely sure I understood.
This one?
Someone explain what you guys did? Especially the graph on the right.
Yeah, the graph on the right gave us some trouble to try to understand it. But essentially, those benchmarks you can think of as, well, just that benchmark. So if you were comparing between studies, want to know essentially the shape of the distribution of the posteriors. And what this does is it gives you an easy heuristic. So if you have a very kurtotic, so it's just one line in the very middle, like Paul was saying, distribution, then you just have a right angle. Study that had that, and compare it to another study that say had a straight line, and be like, oh, the first study is very pointed and the second one is completely flat. And so what that tells you is essentially the uncertainty around the estimate. Without having to look at the actual distribution, you just get a single number. At least I think that's what the idea is.
Yeah, I think radius was a weird, it threw me at first, like just using the term radius. I was like,
It's like the absolute value of the distance as you travel.
Yeah. as you
yeah,
move
distance
away
from
the
zero.
center.
I thought was,
Yeah.
yeah.
So let me make a comment about this. This is an outstanding figure. It really is. This is a great figure. This one is a spectacular figure because it combines both the actual parameters for the HDI as well as the rho. Did this output?
No, I made it by hand.
Oh, damn. If you could get this figure to be produced by your software, this would be fantastic. This is a hard one to understand unless you understand the area underneath this hypothetical posterior distribution. So Paul, I thought you did a good job with this. I did. I thought you did a good job, but this is a tough one because it's novel. And Aziz asked the question, and I thought, I wonder if anybody's going to ask the question about this. Thank you for not letting me go.
Sorry, Paul.
It's okay.
No, this is an awesome figure because what it does is imagine you fold this distribution in half. And one side of it is at 0 now. And in absolute value, right, because you take this negative side and you fold it over here. As you move away from 0, right, what is the area under the curve that is that's in the rope? Now you can see here the radius here. I think that the figure, it would be easier if you envisioned it, right? Because what's going to happen is as you move away from that centroid, at some point you're going to move to the HDI. Now the HDI isn't symmetrical, right? So since you're moving away in a positive direction at the minus 0.18, so imagine that it's not minus 0.18, but 0.18, so it's right here. That if you restricted it only to this side, you would see that it wouldn't be 97%. But because you took the upper end of the absolute value, move away to 0.22 in absolute value from the center, there is 97% of all of this posterior distribution encapsulated in that range. So as you move away here to 0.22, that's this point here, you get 97% of this entire distribution that falls in that. Does that make sense? So really the only part that falls outside 0.22 is this really small 3%. It's a teeny amount.
So is that a metric for asymmetry? I mean, is that what it's
And do
telling?
we generally have two graphs, one that looks on?
Yeah, no, normally you don't have something like this. This kind of is a way in which you can convince somebody that there's a point, even, and I would have picked the closest one to the center, the minus 0.18, and just put this at 0.18, because even at 0.18, if you go up here, it's like 92% of all of the data fall within this lower maximum limit because the HDI isn't symmetrical at 0. Does that make sense?
The reason that we chose the 0.22 is because for that particular variable, it was a positively.
Yeah. But still, the radius is the expansion from 0, right? And so the lower end is 0.18. But you're right, yeah, because you're looking at a positive number. I love this. I wish we could have a default that made it look like this.
It's job security back.
For an artist.
Yeah, right.
It wouldn't be more interesting to look at the rope on the right graph, like how much is in the rope, because the HDI already tells it for 95% of the data.
Yeah, true. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that. Right? The number is not there, I guess. But the fact
Yeah,
that
I
it's
mean,
entirely
because
inside of it, it's 100%. Yeah.
Also, another question, like, what is on the y-axis in the left graph? I somehow missed.
Oh, it's just like frequency.
So just part of the whole.
So the frequency of the correlation.
Yeah, so that would depend on how many samples we specified. So if I increased it to like 30,000, then this would be way higher than if it were 50 or so. Because it's relative frequency anyway, I don't think it really matters to show it. But maybe I'm wrong.
Frequency of the.
That sampled parameter, yeah, from the random walk, yeah.
And the y-axis is mislabeled. Sorry.
In this one?
It's 1 minus the posterior in the row.
It is?
Because the figure, it should look like this.
Shouldn't it be upward? It's like cumulative.
Yeah. It is cumulative.
Oh, so it should say cumulative posterior in the row?
But it's
say that too.
Cumulative 1 minus the posterior. Because if the radius of the rope is 0,
There should be 0 of it in there, shouldn't it?
you know, the whole, well, it's as you deviate, how much of this distribution would be around it.
So if it's 100% in there, it should be 0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love this figure. I wish the figure on the left were the default.
You could probably write a program that would do that.
Yeah. All right, everybody vote.
Yeah, I think so. I've always done it before.
We have what? Group 2. And that was 5. So we did 3, 5, group 2.
It's actually trade secrets. I'm just kidding. We just,
Did you guys make those?
I did.
I mean, like,
God.
his
They were
like
so
best
cool.
interest.
Great.
I'm glad.
Wait,
but-
Spencer.
Yeah, so
Who won?
He won.
No, I wasn't invited.
The cookies one.
The cookies one? Oh, yeah. Did they read off any of the comments?
Comments, there were no comments given.
They're just so good. They're in awe.
My comment was,
Who made
you gotta read Chris. And my
You
comment.
actually wrote one on there.
Yeah, I said, number 1.
I didn't get it, but.
Danny counted.
Yeah, it did not report me.
Yeah.
I wish I was still.
I would eat 2 dozen of these things,
I know,
a
I
cup
love
of tea, in a heartbeat.
My pinnacle was you can achieve, Amanda.
Really?
Yeah.
I like
I'm not that
glasses.
She was cool.
But I don't like this very much.
Actually, right now, I'm gonna be utterly sexist with this comment, because you're gonna make some big things.
I just concluded this video.
Sorry.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
We didn't expect
Oh,
that.
I'm saying that wrong. I would only say that to you, because I'm not. Yeah. Okay, everybody voted? Are we all ready? Okay, we're only 1 minute behind, by the way, so we're proceeding as planned.
I'm ready.
On your marks, let go.
All right. So it's a well-known fact that cats can sometimes be assholes, especially during Christmas time, whenever you have this shiny tree, right, with a lot of ornaments and shiny garland, and it's very tempting for them to just destroy it. And so we wanted to know essentially what makes the cat want to attack the tree. And we kind of had this nagging suspicion that if you decorated it with cat toys, it would make them no more likely to attack the tree, because they're really after the shiny ornaments. So yeah, every year Christmas trees are destroyed by adorable cats. See YouTube for proof. And so what's making the Christmas trees so appealing to the cats? Previous data has indicated that tree appeal is predicted by shininess, shiny ornaments, and garland. We wanted to explore what the likelihood of, what influences this likelihood of the tree being attacked. And would introducing cat toys, like I said, as tree decorations impact tree appeal, make them more likely to attack it. All right, so here's our variables. We have shininess and cat toys. So those are our 3 inputs, and our outcomes is tree appeals. So we're quantifying that by cat attacks per day. We gave a weekly survey to 2,000 cat owners across the country to see how often their cats attack their shiny trees.
So, right, so we were talking about this that has been gathered by scientists throughout the last decades, and this is pretty much depicted here. So the amount of shininess predicts the cat attacks on the tree. So if you have like about 100 shiny objects on your tree, your cat will most likely attack between 15 and 45 times a day. So, yeah, pretty strong influence there. And with Golan, it's kind of the same thing, a little bit less pronounced maybe. So it looked like that in multiple regression. So the model is the following. The appeal of the tree to the cat is 0.49 times 0.2 times shininess plus 0.99 times Golan. So in essence, if you hang 5 more shiny objects, your cat will attack 1 more time. Or if you put 1 more on your tree, your cat will attack 1 more time. So that's already known, right? So the thing is that we were thinking that this model clearly lacks dangling cat toys as a predictor, because as we're saying, we would suspect that these commercially available cat toys to like include your cat in your Christmas experience actually don't change anything. And yeah, that we included it, the cat toy variable in the model and collected some data. And we say that, well, if 10 toys on your tree won't increase the attacks of your cat per day by at least 1, it doesn't matter to us, and cat toys probably won't make the difference.
So when we actually added in the cat toys as our 3rd predictor, what we saw was that our R-squared actually did not go up. And what we tried to define as our rope, our predictor for beta 3 actually was below that value, which doesn't really support our hypothesis so much. So we wanted to further flesh out what was going on here. So we decided to use the NC regression. What we did was assume a prior mean of beta at 0 and an improper uniform prior to let our MC do the work and to simulate our posterior density. So we have this blue line underneath that really shows our 95% HDI variables. So then when we add our rope in for each of these variables, we can see that our first 2, our shininess and our garland, there is no overlap between the HDI and rope, so those ones are still pretty good. But we do find that within the cat toys, the HDI is completely within our rope. So we really do verify at that point that it really hasn't added anything to our model.
All right, so with the frequentist approach, it will rely on the p-value or the likelihood at how the current data set supports the hypothesis, but we really weren't just interested in that. So with the frequentist, we either accept or reject the null that a given IV will impact our linear model, and the p-value doesn't really tell us what we can do with our null. I decided to go with the Bayesian approach because it's more robust. It incorporates new data to update our old model, so it improves on our priors. And it actually allows us to test a little bit more with what we could do with our null hypothesis.
So to sum up everything that these guys have said so far, using cat toys as Christmas tree decorations not influence the likelihood that your cat will attack your tree, thus proving once again that cats are defiant little assholes. We use the Bayesian method because it allows us to improve upon our priors and also test for the null hypothesis. Does anyone have any questions?
Which package do you guys use?
What do we use? MCMC regress, I guess.
How do you guys justify that the cat toy adds more variance above the previous two predictors?
Actually, it should not. If the numbers showed, I put the wrong numbers up there, but it was both 78%. Yeah, so it's 78 here and it's 78 here. Actually.
Can you go to the next slide?
Did you guys fix the B's for the second model that you were confirming, or did you estimate all the B's over again with the new variable?
You estimate it all over again.
Oh, okay.
Could you go over the other slide? I have the green in it too. Slide. Yeah. So what, could you explain those two on the left for me too? So, why is the rope all the way out?
These ones. So first of all, we have like kind of a scaling issue because like you can hang like 200 shiny objects on your tree, while you can only, I don't know, you can't put 200 feet of garland on your tree. So the rope needs to be somehow smaller for the garland thing. And in general, like we don't have effect here, right? So the rope is actually pretty identical between here, here, and here. Like maybe the factor like 5 chains or whatever, right? But here we actually have an effect. So
okay, got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just the scales are different
Yeah.
for them, so it's harder to see.
Yeah, because if the scales were the same, you wouldn't see the rope.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Nice. Okay. Thank you. That was group 2. We have a group 4 coming up.
Okay, so I'm looking at your computer. This isn't gonna fit in mine.
Will that work?
Do we have the little?
I forgot it. I can go
It's
grab
okay.
it.
No, it's okay. We can just use one of your guys's. Yes. Yeah.
When you'll be with us.
Will it work?
Yeah,
It's all in work.
No, it's not gonna work. Okay.
How about the other
Joe,
side?
your computer.
The right side.
Morgan.
The right side. That looks like not the same, but go for it. Yeah. Okay. My bad.
Technology.
Yay.
Okay, so this is group 4.
So we, for our project, decided that we are going to help out DC because they have been struggling with movies. So DC Comics has been struggling in recent years to produce a movie that was widely acclaimed by both critics and audiences. The most prominent example recently was Batman versus Superman, kind of flopped. So the upcoming movie that DC is most worried about is Aquaman. Historically, it doesn't translate very well onto screen because it's kind of a weird concept. And it's set to be released in 2018, which is sort of starting to come up. So DC is getting worried, starting to think about targeted marketing of this movie. Specifically, they're curious, should we start advertising this movie specifically to men and or people who still live in their parents' basements?
would those people be more likely to go see Aquaman? So they went around asking people to rate their interest in seeing Aquaman on a scale of 1 to 100. But targeted movie marketing is expensive, so DC is only going to go through with it if either gender or basement dwelling status predicts seeing Aquaman by a difference of at least 10 points. So 10% since it's on a scale of 100. So we decide, they come to us, group 4, and say, group 4, will you help us with this? We're just no good. And, and we say, of course, we'll help you, DC. We should use a Bayesian method because it will allow us to make use of the region of practical equivalence that they've already unknowingly specified when they said that any difference in movie-going interest less than 10 is effectively 0 for our purposes because it's just not worth shelling out the cash for targeted marketing. It also allows us to make use of previous movie attendance information because we happen to have data on the demographics of movie-going overall. And that data is that neither gender nor basement dwelling status usually have, or the interaction between them usually have an effect on whether people go see movies overall. So we're sort of expecting that they're not going to have an effect here either. However, this is a very specific genre, so we're pretty willing to believe that for this specific genre, it might draw a more specific crowd. So therefore, we chose weekly informative priors that reflect the previous data and that the mean of the normal distribution for our prior is 0, but it's also very wide, reflecting that we're willing to believe that there's some here. So DC went and asked 388 people to rate their interest in seeing Aquaman. And we sampled that sample with replacement to get 4,000 new samples. And as anyone who's ever taken Jose's classes knows, the B value is the rate of change in this case, movie-going interest for a single point increase in gender or dwelling. So basically moving from, as we coded it, moving from not dwelling in your basement to dwelling in your parents' basement. So for basement dwelling status, for all the estimates of B that we got, the mean estimate was about 0. And while the very most extreme estimates of B did touch 10, it's nowhere near the credible. So therefore, we're saying that there's no real reason to expect that basement dwelling status would affect movie-going interest anywhere near the minimum cutoff of 10 points. For gender, our mean estimate of B is about negative 0.2, which is very slightly more meaningful, but as you can see, the most extreme estimates don't get anywhere close to plus or minus 10, so this variable is out as well. And for the dwelling by gender interaction, the mean estimate of B was about 0.4. So that's the highest one we've had so far. So of all of these variables, men who live in their parents' basements are slightly more likely to be interested in seeing Aquaman, but not by very much, and certainly not by enough to meet the 10 points cutoff. So in conclusion, none of our variables predicted a large enough increase in interest in seeing Aquaman. So therefore, we can say with confidence that DC's scheme to market specifically to men and or people who still live in their parents' basements would be an ineffective use of DC's advertising budget, and that they're just gonna have to start writing scripts that actually make sense. Questions?
On purpose.
I did.
It really makes it.
Thanks.
Can you go back to the slide with your posteriors or your priors? I'm sorry. That one. Yeah. So is that the one you used for both this distribution?
Yes, we used this prior for all 3 of our beta distributions. Yes.
Okay.
Because in the previous data, none of the 3 had much of an effect.
Makes sense.
No other questions? You guys just want Christmas to start.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Morgan.
Thank you.
So we're missing a Who's gonna help us present?
I feel like we should take a bathroom break then.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
perfect.
Oh, yeah?
Good
Okay.
save, Amanda.
Just in case.
You have a player to be named later? Oh, okay.
He's the didactic presenter.
Give him a call.
I can present.
His kneecaps. It must be his kneecaps.
He's just hobbling.
Yeah, he's just crawling up.
He's
Yeah.
doing a TA thing.
Oh, for.
We will just
So-
present
Okay,
now,
so-
because everyone wants
When we're
Christmas to start.
presenting to the Googles of the world, you're seeing that we are keep using rope and the HDI in that same graph over and over again. Are you
guys
using
need
a
a
graph
map
that's
adapter?
similar to that? What do
No.
you use?
HDI,
so
If
it's built in.
Is that, you can't use Bayesian terminology to the non-Bayesian world, because they look at things and they're like, I have no idea what that you're talking about. So your 3-minute talk, that's because you're having to explain too much in your figure. So it's really important to use figures that are, think about this. If you're using Bayesian statistics to communicate things in a language that scientists or the people, consumers already use, you want to make sure that you're not introducing new terms that are really unfamiliar to people who might be in your audience.
I'm hoping after this presentation, you can tell us what you say and what you show.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I think
we're
we're
gonna
saying and showing too much for.
Yes.
All right, so as usual, group one, bringing a bit of crassness and lowering the tone of the room. We're going to talk about slaying in the season of the sleigh. Basically, what's the best method for getting laid over holidays? So,
You predicted at least.
yes, my preferred method for holidays is avoiding my family and going to bed early. But apparently, some people actually have fun during the holiday season. So, the holiday season, particularly measured as the weekend prior to Christmas through New Year's Day, is a big party season for a lot of people. And for many people, that leads to getting laid, which we classify as the number of sexual encounters during this time period. So we figured we'd kind of measure a few possible predictors that might predict encounters, as it were.
So being a multivariate model, we have 2 predictors and an outcome. Predictor being level of attractiveness for each individual on a 10-point scale, and the second predictor being the number of Monty Python quotes executed, I guess, while trying to seduce the other person. And our outcome variable is obviously the number of times that someone has sex. So next slide.
As measured by an after-action review. I'm not touching this.
So we have 4 hypotheses. We could have included more, but we kind of forewent the interaction hypotheses. So we have our null for the first one is that kind of support is that there's no relationship between level of attractiveness and number of times that you got lucky. So if this were true, then despite increases or decreases in attractiveness, then they would have no influence on the outcome. And then the alternative hypothesis is that there's a positive relationship between these 2 variables, which is kind of what we're trying to not support. Yeah, and then so basically the same thing for our other 2 hypotheses. The null being there's no relationship between Monty Python quotes, or the number of Monty Python quotes used, and the number of times you have sex, and the alternative hypothesis being that there's a positive relationship between these two variables. Again, we're not trying to support the alternative.
All right, so setting our priors. The 500 students that we surveyed with our after action reviews, we took that data and we got the average of the number of times that someone got laid. We used the mean to make a uniform prior, and the mean of that was 7.
Lucky number 7.
So what we did is we ran an MCMC on all 3 variables, the outcome, and the 2 independent variables, and then we set our rope around the mean of our prior. Then we compared it to the 95 confidence interval of the posterior.
So we ended up with something a bit like this. The red lines being the rope, the 95% rope set around the prior. As you can see, the majority of the data falls within that rope. Now, since we're dealing with practical differences, this isn't the NFL, we're not looking for a big change over a massive set of people. Practical difference in encounters, as it were, and practical changes to behavior. So the data is relatively simple. Attractiveness nor Monty Python quotes has no significant effect on number of sexual encounters during this holiday period. So we chose this particular method because Bayesian regression provides the probability distribution that we saw for each parameter. We could also use a narrow rope, relatively narrow rope, to accept the null and posterior. And finally, we're dealing with practical differences and practical changes to behavior. So using this chart, we can reasonably conclude that neither of our variables have any significant effect. And finally, the end.
So many questions. Okay.
Did you assess for faked data? Oh yeah, I totally got laid last night.
So that's
She goes to
something we
different
just have
school.
to accept as a given. We just have to trust participants' ratings. So, you know,
10 times
maybe
in
there's
10
a
days.
correlation between people who use Monty Python quotes and lies, but
Did they have to use the accent?
a quote related to the Knights of Ni, then obviously. But otherwise, the accent is not crucial to the quote.
Shane is hoping your data is real, but
I took some notes.
Yeah, he's maybe he's thinking that it's false and it isn't.
Yeah.
It's gonna have to change his
Negative.
behavior.
Negative effect.
Doesn't matter then.
Well, data shows it doesn't matter, so keep on.
Can you explain the rope,
Sir?
how you arrived at the rope? You mentioned that it was
Yeah, so we
symmetrical
basically
around the
took the
7.
95 confidence interval of the mean, the intercept, and we set the 2.5 confidence interval on the left, and we set the 97.5 confidence interval on the right. That way we get both. That way anything in the middle is our 95% confidence interval, and then we just apply that to the posterior distribution.
Okay, so you based your rope on empirical priors.
Yes.
As opposed to just specify the rope based upon the number of increases of events.
Was your rope 6 to 8? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was like
Like a little less than.
I feel like one change
Yeah, it was
in
like-
getting laid is significant.
Yeah, it was like 5.6 to 10, right? So if roughly 7 was the central
Yes,
number,
7
right?
is the mean.
So 7
In a week?
So it's 3 on the
Yeah,
upper
that's what I'm
end.
saying.
The
Someone
average
got like
week-
10 or 12 in a week.
Spencer,
Like,
the number of average
seriously.
sexual partners for heterosexual males and females is only 10 over their lifetime. So 7 over the holiday season.
And now you guys are not formalizing your class.
No, he teaches that class.
Yeah.
You can take it if you count.
And these are self-reported.
Yeah.
Some people
Yeah,
just
that's
do
what
it.
I'm saying. It's gotta be big data.
I'm depressed too, I hope.
So here, the rope isn't really symmetrical. Right. Because what you did was you based this one on the observations, and then this
Okay,
one,
I see.
right? So typically, when we think about rope, and there's no right answer to this because the rope is something that you set a priori. Now you can set it based upon the priors, but you can also set it based upon expectations or demands. Say, like Morgan, you guys said it for the company would only accept 10% difference, right? And on a scale from 0 to 100, that 10% is 10, right? So I think it's good that you guys had something different. So I like that. It's just harder to explain. So sometimes you could just say, I mean, if you subscribe to Nick's idea, just one more encounter should be good enough, right? But it would run afoul for what the objective was here, right? Because if you set it as 1, it would have been way harder to accept the null, right? By setting that really narrow band.
Much variance in there in the first place. That's an issue as well.
That's a good point, okay? Because there's a lot of variance and you have a count, right? So a count variable can be really tricky. And several of you guys had counts either as predictors. So you had dummy codes or you had frequency counts like with the, the things on the Christmas tree. I don't do Christmas anymore. I love Christmas, but we don't do it anymore. We travel. So there's things that you put up on the tree, right? And those are a frequency, and you can't have a negative. Now, I'm sure you could have bad sex, but it still counts as sex. Right? So it's still incremented from 0 at a minimum at 0, and it increments for each encounter to be 1. So you guys always have to think about that, about what do your predictors look like? So what would the distribution look like that is the joint distribution between your predictor and your dependent variable, right? Because those are always B's. So Morgan pointed out, you guys took Jose's class, and I hope you remember that the B for a dummy code is really just the mean difference, and that's the reason why she could put the B result as a 10. But here, what you're looking at is you're looking at an outcome, the N for the outcome, and the increase in that N. So the joint distribution would be the mean difference, right, between either, well, no, wait a second, your primary predictor was attractiveness, and was that binary, or was that on a continuum from 0
It's
to
on a
10?
10-point scale.
10-point scale. So from a 0 to 10-point scale, so if you increased attractiveness, for every increase in that numeric rating, did you expect an increase of 1 in number of events, or was it a fraction of events? I think you guys pointed out that you assumed that from our perspective here, that there would be a positive slope. So more attractive would be, you'd have a positive slope. But what would that B look like? And you have to think about that and communicate it to people. Like, what does that B look like? And then the other one is it how good you are, or is that another 1 to 10?
Python quotes.
The number of Monty Python. So that could be 0 to, like, I don't know, somebody who's Monty Python crazy.
Well, it was per hour, so
Per
like
hour,
maybe
yeah.
up to 60.
Oh, rates. No, maybe it's, I don't know, people were really quick. Maybe they have hundreds. And that's the only thing that they speak in Monty Python. Right? So that's even harder because now the B's are changing, so you have 2 separate B's. So I think that the tough part about all of these, and in fact, I'm trying to like summarize this, I'm not pointing these guys out. But the tough part about this is you do have to communicate to your audience the B's and what the distribution of the B's look like. And then the outcome, like how would it give a practical effect that you could communicate to your audience. And that's the crux of all of this, is quantify it under the hood so that you feel confident, but then you have to turn it around and retranslate it to your audience in numbers. So what you guys did was good, because you kept us focused on the number of sexual encounters, which is the outcome of interest, right? But then under the hood, you were talking about all of these things, but since we're Bayesians here, you guys could talk to us about what the distribution of the B's look like, right? And what did that look like?
Overlapping.
Okay, so the B for attractiveness and the B for number of quotes, they're overlapping with 0?
With each other, and both of them were close to 0.
Okay. Do we have a figure?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Because it was ugly.
Because it was ugly, yeah, and
I just, we couldn't make it look nice.
yeah, good choice.
And
Good
didn't
choice.
look convincing.
Yeah, so when you're in a class, you feel compelled to add technical details. Think of every single presentation opportunity as either an opportunity to convince people or an opportunity to obfuscate, confuse people, make it so that, I like obfuscate because it is confusing in and of itself. So you guys, I think, chose wisely, and that's the reason why I want to highlight some of the things that I really liked here. When you present, you want to present ideas that are clear, okay? Stick to what your audience is. You guys had a nice, and all of you, all presentations, had a nice catchy idea, kept me intrigued. I wanted to know what the answers were, maybe not necessarily to this. Been married for 25 years.
It's encounters. It's encounters.
Yeah, exactly.
Not number of partners.
Ah, right, okay.
Could be one partner.
Okay.
Don't be weird.
Thank you, Caesar.
But all the examples were really good. I thought that you all have learned a tremendous amount from this, and I don't know who was responsible for what part and all that, and I don't care. You guys all know about that. What I do want, and I'm going to send out a post afterwards, a very quick form for you guys to rate your group, your partners, okay? Because I don't know what each of you did. So that I will never reveal to anybody, okay? But so far, I've seen fantastic progress. I've seen the quality of the presentations go up. I know I'm having you guys stand there forever, but don't worry.
It's fine.
The quality of the presentations has increased. The quality of the thinking and the rationale and the use of terminology throughout the semester. It's exactly what I was hoping for. And you may not see this, but it's obvious that you carry yourselves differently in what you're doing. Okay, so I really liked this presentation. I thought it was good. I liked all of the presentations. I voted exactly as that. Now you guys get to sit down and vote your conscience, and then I've got a few points that I want to make afterwards. All right, so good job.
He's a ring. Wildfire underneath your car.
You'll be used to this. Maybe smart people are
Doesn't matter.
she's not
here.
Yeah, that's so good.
I've watched that role ever. You did? I've only seen it once. First season. No, the second. No,
You should also see it.
Let's talk about it.
Actually,
So we're having fun doing it. We need more conversation. And what it is. But me and Ari all these conversations.
Everybody finished voting with the grading. While you're doing that, at the end of the year, every year, calendar year, my lab goes out to the pub, to the Ultra Bean. Hey, timing is everything.
Oh, good.
Let's present.
Let's
All right.
Jose was listening through the doors.
Yeah, yeah.
And now it's done. It's safe
Okay,
to go.
yeah, I'm good. So at the end of every calendar year, my group, my lab gets together at the pub, but I usually invite students out as well. If you're around, starting on Friday at 3:30, we will be at the Ultra Bean. Please come. Tomorrow Friday. Tomorrow Friday. So if you're around, please come out. Okay, I buy rounds of beer. So, and if you're not 21, it's I don't know, I don't card you. Get in.
Here.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, yeah. That's cool. So call it pre-gaming. That's a term you guys know. I didn't even know that.
That was good.
Okay. So several people have asked me how Kevin prompted me, and this is the one way I wanted to close out this semester is I wanted to give you a very brief introduction to how I present Bayesian findings to people who don't know anything about Bayesian stuff. And so I wanted to bring up a few things that contrast with the presentations that everyone gave. And it's not that your presentations were bad, they were actually very good. It's just that you don't get exposed to an audience that will sit there and say, whoa, 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 I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. To people in business, they do that. They will interrupt you right away and they'll say, I have no idea what you're talking about. So the first thing, the reason why I set up the rating form as I did is those are the things that matter the most. One, communicate the problem. This has to be within a 30-second span. You have to clearly and effectively communicate what the problem is. If you don't, you've lost your audience. This has to be first. So the way you guys couch your presentations was good because initially what you did was you talked about what the question was. But remember, when you're doing a statistical analysis and you're convincing the audience that you're using a statistical tool, part of the problem is not just answering the question, but it's also what is the problem that you're facing that would lead you to select a Bayesian analysis? So it's a bit of a compound problem, right? So what you would say is, the problem is I want to be able to show that there's no effect because that would be good for us. But traditional statistical tools don't allow us to accept that effect, that no effect. So do you see how you can encapsulate the problem very simply in a clear statement? Second is you have to briefly explain your approach. And you have to spell it. But you have to explain your approach without going into too much technical detail. You know, sometimes it's, I'm using this approach that others in the field have used and just add a citation. So what that is that's a rhetorical device called an appeal to authority. Okay? Oftentimes in business, very effective. In science, believe it or not, we scientists stand around and we say, oh, that's not very effective. Horseshit. Look at every introduction to every single paper you ever write. All it is it's a litany of appeals to authority. Somebody else did it before me. Now, you never say that it's good, bad, or indifferent. You say the things that you believe were good, you report in there. And if your study is about criticizing and showing that other people were wrong, you appeal to an authority that says, see, these people were morons. And I'm going to show you how they were. But you have to explain your approach, and you have to use rhetorical devices to justify that approach. 3, you need to show expected results. Now, I didn't want to lead you to this, but now that you've all done presentations and you've been in a group that you've done 3 presentations, let me show you something that nobody did, but would be really, really effective. This is what I expected. The line should look like that. Notice I don't have anything here or anything here. Sorry, buddy. The line should just look like this. And this is what the line looked like. Wow. It's very powerful to people. If you start putting shit on the axes, people start asking, what does that mean? What does that mean? You're better off not having anything on the axes. And then having a slide later on that shows a more detailed one. Okay, but what you say is, it's got to be very, very crude. I expect this relationship. I expect a scatter plot that looks like that. And that would be bad. So that when you show your results, you can match it up. Which one does it look more like? You don't want to assume that your audience has any background in statistics. And that's the effective way of communicating these things. The more detailed the figure, like I was commenting, I love Sam's figure. Sam's figure, I trust you were the one that annotated it.
Yeah.
Good. I don't want to, it was your group's figure. But Sam did. But Sam did.
Sam did.
Everybody in the group is like, yeah, Sam. That figure is excellent, but it's not a good figure to hit them here. We want a figure that just has a distribution or something like that, where here's 0 and it's right around 0. It would have been super cool. Sorry, Lisa. No, I'm still.
No, I moved it.
Oh, excellent. So I can move over here. I'm not bound. That's where I can go to. So you could say something like this, is that would mean super, super lots of evidence around 0. So strong evidence, and if I learned absolutely nothing, that would be what I learned, right? Absolutely nothing. And so you just start with crude figures so that your audience can go, oh, that's what you were expecting, and that's what you got. Because if you're using statistics as a vehicle for persuasion, which you ought to, you need to persuade your audience. You need to be persuaded first, but you need to persuade your audience. And the way to do that is to give them what they're expecting, or at least say, if this effect, if I shouldn't break Jose's kneecaps, again, I told you it was coming back, and now that he's here, I can talk about him. If we're going to break Jose's kneecaps, this is what it ought to look like. And you really want to clearly demonstrate that in the simplest figure possible. Don't draw attention to the axes, draw attention to the shape of the figure. The shapes of the figures to just show them this is what it's going to look like. And then later, show them what the results are. Bring back one of these figures and say, remember, this is what I wanted, and this is what we got. Damn. Or, great. But it's got to be simple. Only at the end do you give them details like, oh, by the way, I use MCMC if you're interested. All the analyses were done in R. I produced the figures in R. All of that detail is in an addendum in the report. That's it. You don't bludgeon them with a whole lot of stuff. When you're showing the technical details, like a figure that you guys were all using, like with rope and HDI and all of that, you show that after you show your results, and you show them the more technical figure, and then you go back to remember what the problem was. This is why we did it, and this is the solution. And this is our next step. So you're clearly guiding them through the whole process, and you're not hitting them with lots of details about statistics. Statistics, what do you learn in statistics? You know, we make it front and center, and we tell you statistics is really, really important. You will spend an inordinate amount of time running the models and report the results of those models in one sentence. It's really frustrating sometimes. But on the other hand, keep statistics in the back of your mind as a tool for persuasion or a bat to beat down the ignorant, okay? I hope you use them as a tool for persuasion. And so this semester is really an introductory opportunity for you to learn how to learn new Bayesian procedures. And they are all going to be new. What you learned in this class, the tools that you learned here, will probably not be around in 5 years. So you need to know where the resources are, and that's the reason why I emphasize so much of that, of independence and group collaborative efforts. So stay tuned. 5 years from now, shit's gonna be way different. Might even have a point and click interface, who the hell knows? I doubt it. All right, thank you for a wonderful semester. I hope you enjoyed it. So I'll be at the pub tomorrow, starting at 3:30. My son has a swim meet at 6:30 at Audrey Moore, so I have to leave early and sober.
Sober-ish.
No, well, I'm on antibiotics, so I'll be stone cold sober. But please do come out if you have the opportunity.
We'll see a real random walk.
Yeah.